I got involved with a treatment program in Farmington, New Mexico. For 10 years, I worked with them. And over that 10-year period, we incorporated the use of incense, the pipe ceremony, prayer ways in your own language, music done on a drum or with the flute, and we incorporated the sweat lodge as a house of prayer. And 10-year time, we took it from a 17% success rate to a 75% success rate.
Wow. We live in a time when the old maps seem to be failing. And there's a deep collective ache to learn another way to live with one another. You just heard a slice of what's to come in today's conversation. Welcome. I'm David Achata. As an executive coach and author, I've spent my career helping people navigate change. But to go forward, we often have to look back. I created this season to explore how Indigenous wisdom can help us grow into the people our future needs. And whether you're looking for personal healing, better leadership, a deeper faith, or a new way to dream, I'm glad you're here. We're widening this circle this season to rediscover what it means to walk in a good way. So welcome to the How People Grow podcast season 6. So Leonard Case Church is a member of the Pokagon band of Potawatomi Indians of the Bear and Crane clans. He's going to be our guest today, and we're going to be talking about the role of ceremony. He's also a former U.S. Marine. He's a cultural practitioner, teacher, and spiritual leader who has spent decades working to restore Indigenous ceremony and identity in contemporary life. He's also the author of Holy Smoke and Native American Rites of Passage, and his work explores how ritual and ceremony can foster healing, belonging, and personal transformation. So Casey, thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Glad to be on.
So excited to talk to you. We're recent acquaintances, and as I've read about you and seen some of what you're up to, I was hoping to maybe add you as like a bonus episode to this because I just met you recently, but here we are. Tell us a little bit about where you live and, your place in life and what you do for work and maybe even for fun.
Yeah, well, I live out here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I've been out here for 25 years and love it. I was just, before we started here, I was talking with David here that we get an average of 333 days of sunshine a year. So if there's an equinox happening and you live in Oregon or Michigan, you never get to see it. It's always cloudy.
Mm.
But out here, whenever there's anything happening in the sky, we get to see it out here. So it's always beautiful. But I've been doing ministry ever since I was 28 years old. I just now turned 69, and I think it's a day after your birthday too. Isn't that we found out?
That's right. We're one day apart in birthday.
Yeah, so I'm on the second and he's on the third,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of neat. My brother's on the fourth, so
Wow.
boom, boom, boom. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, ministry has been the longest story I can tell on that will go for a day. But the
Mm.
shortest story I can just briefly say that I got my call to ministry, to Native ministry, well, at a Native American ministry leadership group in Michigan. There were 10 Indian churches who organized themselves in a group called the Indian Workers Conference. And at that meeting, I was sitting about 7 rows back. And as I was, looking and listening, uh, and then I heard God talk to me. And in that conversation, he says, who is going to take their places? And as I looked in front of me, the whole scene was gray hair, except
Mm.
for a few women who had gray roots showing. Yeah, that was, yeah, but that was the scene. And I was the youngest one there. And I heard God talk to me and I answered him vocally. And I said, I am. And everyone turned around to look at me. And I wasn't sleeping. I was listening to the voice and I said, I am. Everybody turned around, must have thought I fell asleep and then woke up and like startled and said something. But yeah, afterwards I talked to the two of my mentor pastors who were native, and they said, well, something serious happened here. So we'll talk about it when we get back to the meeting. and they prayed for me, and that was the start of it. And the longest story there too, I went on back to school. My calling was to prepare myself for ministry. So I went back to college and I got my degree in anthropology, cultural anthropology, studied the Native American spirituality and lifeways of the Michigan and surrounding area Indians. I went on to do my master's at Fuller Seminary and used it towards mission called missiology. So I got a master's in missiology, and then I went on to do my doctorate as well in that area too, in writing a book in each time I was in there. So I wrote a book in my master's, and I wrote a book in my doctorate, and then I wrote a book, Holy Smoke, after that. So the ministry in Michigan started in '95. I came out of college, and during that process, I was active, started a ministry. The design of my ministry and the focus is that Native American can come to Jesus Christ without losing their cultural identity. So, along with ceremonies. And a lot of that came from understanding and studying European history and the flow of Catholicism, the
Mm.
entry of the entry of Paul into their world, into their pagan world at the Areopagus, and then from there how Constantinian Catholicism just kind of transformed and created the Christian church that we know today, and and that bled off into creating all of the Protestant versions of it.
Mm.
So that yeah, so that has kind of been my calling. So with that, in studying Native American people, I thought I would uh, find a way to minister to them in a way that would be culturally appropriate. With kind of like the words that are going out today, I'm decolonizing the way Christianity is presented to Native people.
Mm.
And so that led into starting a church in 1996 that was an overwhelming success. 80 people came to the first service. We leveled off to 55. And if you know anything about Native ministries, is that if you have 20 people, you have a big group.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, and I had three, 4 times that
Hmm.
amount. And I've never been ordained by a denomination as sort of like an elder. I didn't get a master's divinity, never wanted it because some people think I'm arrogant, but I think it's arrogant to think you can get a master's of divinity.
Right.
Yeah, like I'm on par with Jesus Christ.
Right.
Yeah, I got his degree. Yeah, like yeah, give me a break, you know. So yeah, I'll talk about arrogant. So I never wanted that. I wanted to do missions, and so I got a degree in missiology, mission
Mm.
theology.
Hmm.
And that led me on to doing many other things in between, starting that church, me getting my degrees, and then moving out here to Albuquerque. Uh, I just spoke with a young man today from Washington, and he says, "I want to talk to you because I'm interested in becoming an evangelist." Well, I asked him, I said, "What kind of experience you got? What kind of education?" "I don't have any education." Well, I said, "Well, let's start there then." And so education is going to be very important. You go into ministry very ignorant of the world. So I wanted to make myself very known in that area.
Mm. Mm.
So moving out to Albuquerque, come to find out statistic wise, 75% of Native American people live in urban settings. 25% of them live in the on the reservations. So where do you think most of the ministry is happens? On the reservation to the
Mm.
minority.
Mm.
And there's such a spiritual need for people in the urban settings because they've lost everything culturally, socially, communally, everything. And now they live here in isolation sometimes. So urban settings have created a way where people can connect. And Good Medicine Way has been that way for people to connect and find a safe place where they can be Native and Christian. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I married Laura, who's a Navajo. I met her here back in 1989, got married in 90, and we have 5 children, four girls and one boy, and they're all out and about. We just recently had one of them move back with us for a little while. She's in a transition time. So this is actually her room. It used to be my study, and now it's become her room. So she's back here, and we're kind of helping her get back on her feet again. And I think fatherhood is a 24/7,
Mm-hmm.
365 lifelong experience. So we're
Yeah.
always we're always mom and dad to our kids.
Hmm.
I guess that's a good for starters there.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for a little background about who you are, your education, what you're doing, what you've done. And I know there's so much more in there
Oh,
we haven't even
right.
touched on. Maybe we'll get to some of that. I'd like to back up and learn a little bit about your story and your ancestry. You came from the Potawatomi Bear Clan on your mother's side and the Crane Clan on your father's side. I'd like to hear a tad about that, but this specific question, though, once you give us some of that background, is how that ancestry has shaped your understanding of ceremony and your identity.
Well, where to start on this? My family from Southwest Lower Michigan in the early 1800s, that life was good. Families were living and prospering, and life was different there because Native people and then the encroachment of white Western people moving into the area was changing our world. So in 1833, the government thought best that we no longer live there and relocate all of the Potawatomis to Kansas. So in their wisdom, in their wisdom, they said, we're going to move you at gunpoint to Kansas. So that became the beginning of a big traumatic time. And it uh, started off by many people being rounded up in stockades and that. And then there was my great great grandfather, Leopold Pokagon. He was the founder of our little community, kind of the chief of our community. He had the wherewithal to think about folks, family members, something's happening here that we have no control over, but we can play this game that the government wants us to do. They want us to assimilate. And because we're not assimilating, that's why we're being relocated to Kansas. So he thought these 6 families that we need to play the game, send your kids to school, dress them in different clothes, start farming. If we can go to church, go to church. Stop using your language, stop using your customs and ceremonial ways. But they did happen in the background. In the, so that was kind of what he had in mind, and he took this even further. He went to Detroit and talked to the diocese, Catholic diocese at the time, and asked for a priest to be sent to his community in Southwest Lower Michigan. And doing that, they sent the Catholic priest, and that kind of sealed the deal for them to stay in Michigan. So my band of Potawatomis, the Pokagon band, are the only Potawatomis to stay in the homeland.
Wow.
Yeah. All the rest of the Potawatomis in Wisconsin, the Chicago area, Indiana, Michigan, and northern Michigan all got rounded up and moved. And yeah, so we have our homeland there in Southwest Lower Michigan, and other tribes got relocated. Today, there are two other federally recognized Potawatomi groups, one in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and one near Battle Creek.
Hmm.
And so they reorganized themselves because after the relocation and everything, people could come back, and that kind of everything kind of dust settled, and people started families and life again. But yeah, so that's still going on today. But because of all this transition, a lot of our ceremonies had to be put on hold and had to be lived out in what I call the iceberg. The iceberg is that what the people wanted to see was the visually on the surface how we were adapting into white Western culture. And but what they didn't see is the bigger part of the iceberg that is submerged was the retention of our culture, our community ways, our spiritual ways. All of those things were deep within us, and that was part of my family, my grandpas and grandma, and my mom and dad. They were still living the iceberg, even though they superficially they were the assimilated Indians. And so they gave up their language and they didn't teach any of us, my siblings and I, the language. Kind of that's a trauma that I still live with today, that because of white Western assimilation, they, my parents felt best that we not learn our language.
Mm.
So I'm traumatized by that because I could never pick it up. I'll be 70 next year. It's like go to language classes for the next 10 years and then die at 85, Yeah, who knows?
Right.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
spent my life without my language.
And did your parents speak it?
Yes, but they didn't share anything with us at all.
Mm. So they
In
kept it
fact,
quiet even at home.
yes, even though if we learned it, we would get even more discrimination in the schools and community.
Mm. So what was
Yeah.
that like for you as a kid, knowing there's this language we're not supposed to speak, but they know it and I don't? What were you thinking and feeling as a kid?
Well, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. So they didn't teach me, so I didn't know that I had a language that I could learn.
Mm.
Except when I went to church, they would do songs, and then some of the preachers would speak in Indian, and I couldn't understand them. And so the only native language that I know are the Christian songs that were translated into our Potawatomi language.
Mm.
So I
Right.
can sing those songs and I can say some prayers, but I can't. I'd say they only learn those by repetition, and
Mm.
they don't really mean anything. I just know them by by auditory, just
Yeah.
saying them. So they don't nothing deep in there.
Mm.
So other ceremonies, this is the part of the traditions that I did study, is I wanted to study the Native American spirituality of the people of Michigan. And in Michigan, there are three tribes: the Ottawa, the Potawatomi, and the Ojibwe are all part of that region of people. And combined, we're called the Anishinaabe people. And that's the people of the three fires. So one fire for each one of the tribes. And so they had a spirituality that was called the Medewan Medicine Society. And that was the underground spirituality that they kept going in back in the backwoods, far away from white Western people, knowing that we did ceremony. So it's still alive and well today because of some of the elders and teachers that kept it alive in the backwoods. And so it now today, after 1978, with the Native American Religious Freedom Act. I mean, can you believe it? We had to have a congressional approval in order to practice our religion.
Mm.
How
Wow.
many white Western people have to
Yeah.
practice your religion to have a congressional approval to do that? So we had that
In
approval.
1978.
Yeah, 78. Yeah,
Recent.
very recent. Yeah. So that took place, and so it kind of opened a door that we could come out of the woods and start doing our ceremonies. And but there's a big thing there. There was just a meeting recently between Christian pastors and people, missionaries, who were native, and then the local spiritual people who don't practice Christianity, but practice the native spirituality. And then they had a meeting together to dialogue, to find some common ground and some forgiveness, because there's the wave of the ministry that I'm doing is incorporating my traditions into my Christianity, and that has developed over the last 30 years. So this group got together to talk about, the differences and why we felt that way, and the the pastors say, well, that's the way the white Christians taught us, and we had to leave our ways. And then your ways, they taught us, were pagan, and they were of the devil. We can't use our native ways to worship Christ. And so that was the mentality, even so much so out here on the reservation here, native churches out there look white Western. They don't look anything that would be a drum, a feather, or anything of our native culture. It's still prevalent out here, but there's a resurgent over the last 30 years when I started, along with a group of other people who had the same idea and mentality, to bring our ceremonies to a level to where they can be fully accepted as Christian expressions of our faith. But
Mm.
that still rubbed the Christian natives wrong, and the native spiritual people. There were tears shed because the native spiritual people talked about how it hurt them so bad that the Christian native people looked down on their roots
Mm.
of where they came
Hmm.
from and highlighted the white Western Christian expressions
Yeah.
above theirs. And so, yeah, so it survived, and over
Yeah.
time, yeah, it's healing people now too. So I'm in connection with many different kinds of ministry that are doing healing ministries, not focused on Christianity, but focused on native spirituality as a way of healing.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
and it is having very good success. I even got a couple of books right here. One here, one of them has to do with alcohol treatment.
Mm.
So it's it's called the road to wellbriety. So they're using, like the 12-step program in a way, but using Native American teachings in order to bring people out of drugs and alcohol addiction.
Yeah.
And very spiritual, but very directed towards healing, because today Native people have to live in a world of healing almost all the time, because I can't speak my language, but I have over the last, 35, 40 years, rebrought my cultural ways, brought them back into my life.
Hmm.
But it took me talking to elders who also believed the same way I did.
Mm.
So yeah, so I had to
Yeah.
talk with teachers who knew the spiritual ways, and then asked them to teach me and direct me. So, but I let them know that I was a believer in Christ, and so they said that is fine because there is only one creator.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
one group calls him Jesus, and another group calls him Gitchimanatu. It's the same creator.
Mm.
There's only one, but there's two different ways to approach them. So that kind of led me to have peace about the way I do my
Hmm.
ministry.
Wow. When did you realize personally how important it was to have your native ways, the ceremonies, beyond this idea of it's something my parents did or my ancestors did, to know this is actually what I need?
Yes. Well, it came a time, and I write this in a story, of how at one time I was not in my culture, but something about psychology and the study of triggers and trauma. There's on our DNA, they say that there's your DNA can record the traumas that you've had in your past life, and even traumas that your ancestors may have encountered too. And so, uh, in my study and in the way I see it is that if memories can be placed on our DNA that bring up bad things, there's got to be a place on our DNA for good things
Hmm.
that I
Yeah.
call that I call glimmers.
Hmm.
There's triggers and then there's glimmers. So the glimmers are the positive things that come out of my my history, not only my parents and my life and my parents and my ancestors. So there's good things. So at one time I was feeling, I talk about it in my book on how I had a dream. In that dream, that those glimmers just came to life, and a dream that turned into a vision that totally set the trajectory of my life. that just made me cry because there was something there that I was lacking, but was there within reach. If only I would take the time to reach out and try to study and bring it back into my life because it was within reach, but out of reach because of parents and assimilation. So I talked to people that were in my circle and started learning. And the more that I learned, the more that I healed
Hmm.
in myself.
Hmm.
And so the tears that I shed and knowing that my let's say my dances or my prayer ways, they didn't have to be given up. They just had to be directed to God Most High. Yeah. If I call him Gitchimanitu, it's the same God. But one would call, no, that's a pagan religion. No, and we couldn't. Christianity was considered a pagan religion at one time too, because the
Right.
Jewish people and the Roman and Greek people to say, why are you following that strange Christian way? It's so pagan, and then that becomes the way of the world after that. So that that way healed me and then put a desire in me to do something to help heal many other people. So
Hmm.
that has been my ministry over these last 30 some years.
How old were you when you got this vision?
Yeah, it was in 1992.
Hmm.
So I was 33 years old,
Hmm.
32, 33 years old. Yeah.
Are you open to tell us what was the content?
I can tell you just so much, but it's written in my book, Holy Smoke.
Okay.
I did write in Holy Smoke a portion of it. But
Hmm.
in dreams and visions, it's you can share bits and pieces of it, but you can't share all of it because it would lose its power.
Hmm.
And its power is the power that it has to direct you in your life. It
Hmm.
isn't a power like I can, can lift rocks and
Hmm.
power that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a power that enables me.
Hmm.
So the little story that I tell in the book there is that I had this dream in 1992, but it came about because I was back in school and I was writing a paper about this distance I had between my traditions and Christianity. I was writing that paper and trying to flush it out of my mind and get it into words. And then in that evening, I I've been working on it for a while. So in this evening, I went to sleep, and then during the middle of the night, I had this dream, uh, and it was a dream almost so real that it was of me as an Indian boy 2,000 years ago. And I was on a vision quest with my father to find out my path in life, to find my purpose. And so we went to the shores of Lake Michigan, and in that time there, it was a 4 day walk, and we did a 4 day fast during that time too. So I was kind of weak, and then my mind was ready for a vision then. So we sat, we built a fire, built a little lean-to to cover us. We were close to the lake. There was a stream nearby. There were animals, everywhere. And so I fell into a trance
Hmm.
by looking at the fire, fell into a trance. And during that trance, I was transported from there to this time 2,000 years before. And there were three men hanging on crosses, beaten to pulps, just bloody and bleeding, and and hanging from these trees, poles. And they were, and I was there, and I, as I looked at them as this young little boy, I said, "What kind of people would do that to their own kind?" And I looked at the people, and they were wearing cloth clothes. The men all had hair on their face, like native people. You never see a bearded Indian. Yeah,
Hmm.
we don't grow beards. Uh, if anything, we grow this little Fu Manchu thing because because of our roots from Mongolia. Yeah, we grow that. But yeah, they were totally different. I couldn't understand the language that they were speaking in that vision. But then as I looked around and I looked up at the guys that were hanging on the poles and I made eye contact with with what come to find out was Jesus, is that when I made contact with him, it was like soon as I made contact, there was like this phone transfer. Remember you used to put your phone next to somebody's and then contact would
Yeah.
transfer over, kind of like, that happened immediately. It's like soon as that happened, I knew why he was there. I knew the context, and then as soon as I knew, I was swept back to Michigan again.
Hmm.
This I no other experience there. Just knew what was happening. And when I got back to Michigan on the lake shore there, I, I felt my father was holding me because I guess I must have been really tossing and turning in my dream. So my father was holding me and just until I woke up. And when I woke up, I says, "Oh, I got to tell you what I just seen. I got to tell you what I seen." And he calmed me down. He says, "Just wait, just reflect on it, and I'll get you some food and I'll get you some water." And he brought that back to the fire and he cooked that he caught a rabbit. He was cooking that rabbit and that was almost done. And he brought some water in a shell that he had from the stream that was nearby, brought some water. And then he got the rabbit prepared and he put it on another shell and I was ready to eat it. But then what I did is I took the rabbit that he prepared and I says, "I want to say something about this. I just feel I got to say something about this." So I took that piece of rabbit and then I took that shell with water in it. And I says, when I when I eat this rabbit and when I drink this water, I do this in memory of the man on the pole.
Hmm.
And that was communion.
Hmm.
I was doing a communion without ever having any colonial influence in my life.
Wow.
I was a native person without any colonial experience, identifying with Christ on the cross and then expressing it in a way of
Hmm.
remembering
Hmm.
what he did on the cross. So so it was very contextual. It was a
Hmm.
rabbit by and from a fire and water from a stream in a native setting. Uh, and that was the start of me understanding what's called today contextual ministry.
Yeah.
It was just that grew out of that time. So that's
Hmm.
a piece of that vision.
Yeah.
Another piece of the vision, just a glimmer that I'll share into that. The rest of it was it transitioned into uh, a book that was opening in front of me. The book that was opening in front of me was big, and I drew pictures of it at one time of this book like this going
Hmm.
like this, the leaves flowing like that. And what it was is as I looked at the pages of the book, is that they were the story of my life. I could read about what I did years ago, and I could turn about the pages of what I'm doing now. And then as I turned further into the book, I shut the book because I didn't want to know the future.
Oh. Huh.
And so the future has been unraveling itself year after year now and has become these books that I have written.
Hmm.
And I may have two more books in me, but I have one more book in me that I want to get out. And it's about Good Medicine Way and
Hmm.
how this has all happened over the last 20 years.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing some of the vision and how it's informed, your experience since then. You mentioned Good Medicine Way, you mentioned Holy Smoke. These are really cool names, but they really do have roots in ceremonies.
Yes.
And there are many listening in are unfamiliar with this. There are a few who may have some context, but most probably not. And so from the outside looking in, some people might say, this seems really mysterious. This is
Hmm.
really like foreign here. So maybe you could explain what do some of these terms mean that you're using? Holy smoke, good medicine way, but but even broader, what does ceremony do in people's lives that everyday normal living doesn't?
Hmm. Living the way I see ceremony is a 24/7 we live in ceremony constantly. As Native people, we recognize God in all creation. And the Bible in Romans 8 says that we're without excuse to know that there is a creator because of what he has created. And so we live that without knowing the Hebrew scriptures. We already know it, that God, creator, is with us. So ceremony is part of life. Um, in reading and studying over the years, Victor Turner used a term called rites of passage.
Hmm.
And and it and it has to do with no matter no matter what you're doing, you're going through a rite of passage. And he called it a liminal stage. So rite of passage,
Hmm.
there's a beginning, middle, and an end to almost everything you do. So when you wake up in the morning, that's a beginning. And you spend the whole day in this stage of life and you've learned and lived, and then you go to sleep. So you've woken the liminal stage and then you complete it. So that has been a whole ceremony. Just your whole life has been.
Hmm. Wow.
So everything in life works that way.
Hmm.
So we treat everything as sacred as well, because everything God made. Even if we got a book, the pulp that made the paper is still
Hmm.
made by God.
Right.
There's things of God all around us. Even as this synthetic thing, I have the mat in front of me here, it didn't come from nothing. It came from something that God had created. So God's presence is all around us no matter what. So that's a little bit spooky, but it leads over into my understanding of the Holy Smoke Book. The Holy Smoke Book started off not as what it turned out to be, the story that I wrote, but it started off in my doctoral work that we had to come up with a topic that we wanted to study. And because of my wanting to know more about culture and traditions, I wanted to know, uh, and you'll see how the word fits. I wanted to know about the Hebrew use of incense and the Native American use of incense, and how I wanted to study both and then compare and contrast them. Is how could incense in the Bible, let's Leviticus, how could they burn incense and it's a pleasing aroma to God? And I mean, they burn incense, but they burn birds, they burn sheep, they burn bulls, they burn,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and burnt things. That smoke that went up was a pleasing aroma to God. But then native people, we didn't have those roots that the Hebrew people did, but we still burnt things as prayers. We burnt sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco. And that incense from those elements sent a sweet smell up. And if we were looking in Hebrew times, and it was a pleasing aroma to God, and still is a pleasing aroma to God when we burn it today. Yeah. And
Hmm.
so that that's one of the things I see. So I wanted to study that. And when I told my professor that I got a working title for this, studying incense, I says, I want to call it Holy Smoke. And he just about fell over laughing. He says, that's a great title.
Yeah.
That's a great title. But it turned out that I didn't study that, because what I did end up studying is that I spent 10 years with an alcohol treatment program. And here's the kind of the draw everything together, is that when I started off in ministry, I wanted to find a way to incorporate Native traditions as expression of faith and expressions of ways to heal. And I wanted to, I proved it in that church plant that I did, that people came, we had healing, I pastored it, and then I went on. But I even stepped into even further. I got involved with a treatment program in Farmington, New Mexico. And during that time, uh, the director there wanted to do treatment program differently than it conventionally is done, in a secular way. Uh, that you can do faith-based with the 12 step. They combine it because the 12 step came from a Christian person. Yeah. And he wanted to do it differently because he understood that the results of of doing a treatment program, roughly, it only runs at the most 20% success. 20%
Yeah.
success rate of when you work with alcohol treatment program or drugs and alcohol. There's 20. He says that's all. That's almost like job security. Yeah, there'll always be somebody there to always have treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few people. If you got 10 people, a couple of them are going to be okay, and the rest of them,
Hmm.
80% of them are not. They're not. They're going to always fall back into their ways. So he didn't want to do that, and he came to a presentation that I did in Albuquerque, and he said, "I want to talk to you. I want to bring your program and add it to what we're doing now." So for the next 10 years, from 2001, for 10 years, I worked with them. And over that 10-year period, we incorporated the use of incense, the pipe ceremony, prayer ways in your own language, music done on a drum or with the flute, and we incorporated the sweat lodge as a house of prayer.
Hmm.
And so with those things that we incorporated along with the other parts of the program, and 10-year time, we took it from a 17% success rate to a 75% success rate.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
recorded, and all the statistics in here are in the book. It's called Native American Rites of Passage, the process of change and transition. And it talks about how I brought my concepts of bringing Native American ways as expressions of Christian faith into this program. And over a 10-year period, we had those kind of results. But in order to prove it, I wanted to show that my concepts were very, authentic and they're working. We tracked the men, physically tracked the men as they went through and as they graduated from the class and as they went into the world. How did they do? Sure, some of them fell back, right? But yeah, so you know, two of them fell back, eight of them came out all right. We
Hmm.
only did groups of 10. So
Hmm.
it's kind of easy to keep statistics of just
Yeah.
10 people.
No.
So we kept the statistics. So we followed them, whether they went back to work, got jobs and they stuck with them. They went back with their families. They forgave their parents. They got back with their children. They got back with their marriages, went on to college. Yeah. And their lives, the other ones that didn't do so well, they went back into drugs, they went back into
Yeah.
alcohol, they went
Yeah.
back into living in the streets, they went back into there. The people that we followed and tracked all went in positive ways.
Hmm.
So reading this, by doing this program, you can work yourself out of a job
That
instead of
is,
having job security.
yeah, that is such an amazing study in what happens when you change recovery from our therapeutic models that are oftentimes based on learning and talking, and you're shifting it into ceremony. If you could take us back to some of those times as you started working with those groups of 10, how were those people who were in addiction responding when you're putting them through these ceremonies differently than if they would, say, be in a group therapy circle?
Well, we have a long time to do it there too because it's a 3-month residential program.
Hmm.
So when we first started in, we started talking with the directors that ran the program and showing, I had to teach them first. So we spent a weekend together showing, well, this is how we'll incorporate it, and here's some drum songs that we can do. There's already a musical groups out there that are creating a genre of Christian native music. So we can use that music and sing the songs on the drum or with the flute, and that's there. And the prayer ways are still there. So we use incense. We use an abalone shell with sage in it, with fire, and then an eagle feather to fan that. That's part of our spiritual ways already as indigenous people. It isn't prayer ways where you go to church and the priest says your prayers or prays for you. No, you actually pray because the curtain is cut and we have access to God. Yeah. So you don't need the priest anymore because
Mm-hmm.
we are all individually priests. And so we have access to God by ourselves because the curtain has been torn. So we can pray directly to Jesus and to God. So with that, they understood some of that. So with the first people that came through, many of them were in their native world. This is happening in the Four Corners area of New Mexico. And so there's a lot of ceremony going on out there. And like I said, only, 20% of Native American people or 10% of Native American people are born again. So you got 90% of the Native people are still living in a non-Christian world, but still living in their world of ceremony. So there's people that do sweat lodges, people that do tent ceremony, teepee ceremonies. There's people that do dancing and healing. That's all happening. So we they're familiar with it already. So when we start talking to them in the first month of treatment program, is that it's new to them, but by time 3 months go, then it gets more accepting. So I went there to the treatment program, introduced it to the directors. They ran it. I came in once a month, sometimes twice a month, and would work with them and then do a sweat lodge, and then work with them and do a sweat lodge the next month, and work with them and do a sweat lodge the next month, and then do a sweat lodge for the graduation time. So during the week, they sang the songs, they learned the theology, Christian theology from Native American songs, Christian songs.
Mm-hmm.
They learned that. They learned to be comfortable with the burning of sage because it's part of their world already. The non part of their world is that when you want them to pray in a white Western Christian way,
Yeah.
that's foreign. But
Mm-hmm.
you want me to, that's the only way you're going to accept prayers if I pray hands and knees, Bible open in front of, yeah, that's the only way a white person pray? No, but what if I have my shell, my sage, my smoke, and I'm outdoors? And because the Bible says God does not reside in temples made by hands. Yeah. And I said, so why do we go to a building to have church
Mm-hmm.
when our sanctuary is the world outside
Yeah.
here? Yeah, it's open to him. There's no ceiling where you're,
Mm-hmm.
some people say your prayers are just hitting the ceiling, you know? No, not with Native people. Our prayers are going right out into, heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that kind of worked out.
Yeah.
And the Holy Smoke book became a story of how I lived out my Christian life in what I did. So I ran a Christian camp. I worked in alcohol treatment program. I raised my family. I lived and I went through transitions and how I worked with my life ways in those transitions I went through, become a director of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So it's how it's one of the first, some people call it's the first contextual book that's out there that explains how to live your life in it as a native person, native believer in Christ. So it's being used by
Yeah.
seminaries now.
Wow.
So yeah, it's being used by Bible colleges and seminaries because it's
Mm-hmm.
and that's how I get some of my speaking engagements. So
Mm-hmm.
the book is getting out there and people are seeing it.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives you an idea of my Christian life into my native world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. What I keep thinking listening to you is we spoke a moment ago about liminal spaces. And in an earlier interview in this season, I interviewed Dr. Daniel Costello, and we also stumbled on this idea of liminal spaces.
Yeah. Damien and I go way back. Yeah.
Oh, you
We've worked.
do?
Yeah. He teaches at the same seminary that we started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I was there before he came on.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so wild, the older you get, the people you meet, everybody is connected.
Hmm.
But back to this idea of liminal spaces. You're mentioning sage. You're mentioning sweat lodge. What is it, do you think, that changes when you put people into these ceremonies that talking or reading just can't?
First off, I've had over the years now, uh, bringing the treatment people into this program, they had 3 months of transition to learn to accept it. And the next group that came in, they already know that this program is going to incorporate it already. So they didn't come in it to it cold. So they're already kind of prepared. And how they get selected to come to the treatment program is through an interview process. So you just can't say the judge has ordered you to go to treatment program. You just can't say, okay, I'll go to that one. Interview process, they talk about, do they have some kind of faith grounding first?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of brings them in, and then opens them up to accepting it. But so over the years here now, to teach non-natives and to teach other just native people who are raised apart from their culture to be accepting in it. I started doing at this camp called the Wachoni. It's written in the Holy Smoke Book, the Wachoni family camp in Oregon. And we started that in 2001. And I ran it for 17 years straight. And what we did is we incorporated this. It was on a Methodist campground too. So the Methodists were very open to having this happen there too. So we had an area for 2 sweat lodges. We had an area for a powwow. We had an area for cultural teachings, an area for singing with the drum and having a fire, all at this camp. So, so when people came to the camp, it was a way for them to, I think what Richard called it, it's a living laboratory of how you can live your Christian faith in a native setting. So that's what people had a chance to do there. So what they learn is they come out of their ignorance of not knowing their cultural ways, only knowing white Western Christian ways, let's say Lutheran, Baptist, Methodist, only that way of doing church. And now opening them up to say, this native ways, you can pray this way too. And you don't have to use this hymnal. You can use genre of native songs, Christian songs, and you can use prayer ways. You can even dance your prayers. So in the powwow, when we go out there to dance, every time our feet touch the ground, we're praying as we touch the ground when we're dancing, and we dance our prayers. There's even some dance styles that are called dance styles. The jingle dress style is a prayer dress. So the jingles, when they jingle, when they're dancing, they're shaking prayers.
Mm.
You know, probably you probably think of the Tibetan monks who you know
Yeah.
make noises and they blow horns and everything that they do, and they spin these things, and oh, forget what you call that drum that you go back and forth.
That's right. From the
Yeah,
Karate Kid.
yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
think of.
yeah. And there's prayers going out by making noise like that. So the jingles are kind of like that too, as you're sending prayers. So as people break from the confines of the white Western Christianity and experience from a Native American view, so this could be an Indian person who is like totally white Western Christian, and then the experience this way, they come to see that, oh, this feels really, really good. This feels like something's been missing in my life a long time. Kind of like what I said when I first started, that I was missing something.
Yeah.
Now they're starting to see that they're missing something. And so that's how it works with a native person. But then you get a white person who is in white Western culture, and they say, well, I want to know more about it so that I can help Native people. So I would do a sweat lodge, and I called the Sweat Lodge 101. So in that teaching of the Sweat Lodge, we sit outside and talk, and I try to break down the barriers of their ignorance of what it is, and try to get rid of the spookiness that they feel.
Hmm.
That, oh, that's got to be evil because it's not. I don't see that at church.
Hmm.
So it's got to be evil. So that's what missionaries thought. When as soon as they came into our world, they says, that don't look like what I'm used to, so it's got to be of the devil. So
Mm.
that's how they demonized our culture from the very start. And that's what you do to make people, different.
Yeah.
Is you take away their identity, their language, their culture, their ways of life, and you minimize them to a point that, they're non-people.
Mm.
And so that made the transition of taking our world easier by
Mm.
making us non-people. But
Mm.
a white person will come into the sweat lodge and I'll teach them that it's not spooky. You can pray in here. And it's this, I use the term sometimes. You could even be baptized in here because how much water does it take to be baptized? You know, you can immerse.
Right.
You can immerse three times, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or you can pour like the
Uh-huh.
Methodists do. You can
Yeah.
sprinkle.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you can sprinkle. I even got, kind of flippant, but I said, what if I had an atomizer bottle and I sprayed you?
Right.
Would that be a baptism?
Uh-huh.
How about if I put an ice cube? What if you're from Alaska? What if I put an ice cube on your head and you let that melt
Mm.
and that water baptizes you?
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, now you're in a sweat lodge. How about the steam? Could steam baptize you? It's all
Yeah.
water. It's all
Yeah.
water, right? And then I get into other things of different things from Victor Turner that it isn't what you do, it's how you do it that makes the difference.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's a difference between um, form and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
We do forms in Christianity, and that they put meanings into it. Native American people, now we got forms that we use. Now you change the meanings from uh, not knowing Christ to now you know Christ, and now your form now the prayers go to Christ or God
Mm.
Most High.
Mm-hmm.
So their forms and meanings are what make the difference there. So
Mm.
if you keep the same meanings of a separate from Christ, and the way I use the word pagan sometimes is that pagan to me is just that means it's a spirituality that doesn't have Christ. Doesn't mean that that spirituality is bad. It just means that pagan means that it's separate from being a Christian, a Christ way. So if they use Christ in their way, then it transitions over to be a Christian kind of thing. So
Mm.
spiritual ways are not bad. It's a way for people to connect with the world, with community, with relations, with love, with hate,
Yeah.
everything. It's a way that we understand the world with ceremony. So ceremony helps us to navigate the world. In a native setting, it's kind of like two different things. In the Hebrew way, they do rituals every year. Yeah, they got Feast of Booths, Feast of Tabernacles. And every year they'll do them. Those are ceremonies that connect them with the roots of their Hebrew tradition. Yeah, Native people are no different. We have different ceremonies to connect us with our roots to who we are as Native people. So they're different ceremonies than tabernacle and booths and that, but they're ceremonies that connect people to who they are as their native people. So ceremony is good for every different group, but some ceremonies you just can't plop one into the other and make it work one way or the other. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what Christianity has tried to do.
Yeah.
Christianity has tried to say, I'm going to take my potted plant and put it into your world, and that's got to grow in your world. No, it should be Europe, you put Christ in your world first, and you created Catholicism. How about you put Christ in our world, and we create a Christianity that looks like us? We won't call it Catholicism because we already got that term. We'll call it Indigenous spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
but
Thank
I do a
you.
whole session. I do a whole session on one teaching that I do kind of really blows a lot of people's minds because I've never seen that. I call it Christian history has been influenced by pagan culture throughout Christian history. And I start from Ur of the Chaldees, where Abraham came from.
Mm. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Abraham wasn't a Christian.
Mm.
He walked out of his pagan world, stepped out of that world, and he prayed. How did he pray? There was no Bible. There wasn't even a Jesus in his world at that time. There was just, I now believe in this God Most High.
Yeah.
That's it. Jesus came along many years later. Bible came along many years later. All of that. Church, pews, kneeling bench, all of that. Songs, hymnals, all came. So Abraham didn't say, I want to pray to God Most High now, but not, do I use my pagan ways?
Hmm.
And what God said is that that's prayers. All you got to do is direct your prayer now, not to small g God over here, but to capital B God in me.
Mm. Yeah.
So, so the pagan ways have always influenced Christian history.
Mm.
So now I take that all the way through the timeline, going through, Moses and then Abraham and then all the way through Egypt and with in that world across the Sinai back to Jerusalem and then on through Asia Minor and then crossing into uh, Europe and then from Europe crossing over into North American, Native American people. Like
Mm.
kind of takes about an hour and a half to do that whole story, but to lay that all out and show people,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, what an overview. When I listening to you, the thought that just keeps coming to my mind, as you said earlier, is we've taken forms of our faith and assumed that those forms will work in another context.
yeah,
And it's not about that. It's about a contextualization of the God who we say is most high. Yeah, and as we finish up, I want to know, what would you say, how would you guide us for many folks who are listening who are thinking about ceremony, and we don't have a lot of those things in modern society.
right.
So we don't have things for transition or grief. We have birthday parties, for celebration, but time frames of growth, these transitory times. How would you advise simple ways that people can begin to restore the power of ceremony in their lives?
I think because the white Western culture does not have rites of passage. They don't have ceremonies to take you into manhood or womanhood or and we do have these you can see them. We do have as a young man grows up, he has his first beer. He shoots his first deer
Mhm.
and yeah, his voice changes. Those are but we take those times as transitions and we emphasize them in our way. So when a baby has their first laugh, that's something happening between their mental, their physical, and emotional. It's all coming out into laughter, uh, and we see it that way, but it's probably just a way that baby's making new verbal sounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, but we take it seriously. That's a rite of passage. And then say it's a girl. That girl grows up and gets about 11, 12 years old and has a menstrual cycle. There's a time of change there. And we take that very, very seriously and we do ceremony, sometimes 4-day ceremonies on that. In the white cultural world, uh, you get your driver's license, you
Hmm.
graduate from college, and you
Hmm.
got your first kiss, and then you got your first lay with a girl. Let's say a girl now. Yeah, yeah, you got those the very first things that happen, but and then some of those are supposed to happen within the bounds of marriage too. But yeah, we know they don't.
Yeah.
So yeah, but those got to be you can create ceremony. And
Hmm.
I think that's what Laura and I've done is that so many ceremonies that we do not know about from our native ways, but we know that all of life is sacred. We have created ceremonies in our own family. Yeah, so we have times that we have taken the puberty ceremonies very sacred. We didn't know about how to do a boy in a very native way. So we talked to some of our elders and our advisors, and we created a ceremony for my son to transition to being a man. And that's a whole nother story that I'm working some of this out with a guy from the East Coast here. His name is Troy Magnum. He runs a men's ministry, and he wants to know how he can bring men's ceremonies into his program so his guys can understand there's passages that you have to recognize them as you grow in life and take them seriously. Birthdays are part of that, but then there's also, and you got a dog here that just walked in. Yeah, my dog. I just tell you, you can't see it's on
Oh,
blur.
we're blurred.
But she just walked out just now. But see, yeah, ceremony. So you got to create special times,
Hmm.
and
Right.
it doesn't have to be just birthday, weddings, baby showers, uh, those kind of things. You can create things in your life that, like I'm going through a time of getting old. I My daughter, she brought up one here. She says, I'm turning 30. I'm transitioning to, I'm not a younger lady. I'm a middle-aged lady now. She says, I want something to recognize my life going into this new stage of my life. So we created something. So me, when I turned 65, I officially can get my Social Security.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we had a little ceremony to that mark that time of me going into the next phase of my life here, and now getting on close to 70 now. Do I do a ceremony at 70 here? Uh, Part of that, because I keep myself in very good physical shape, so I could run a 5K if I wanted to out there. I train, I lift, I keep my body, going. But age is degenerative things happening with my body just because of age. Yeah, yeah, I'm not this that just yeah,
Your hair
this
looks
kind of
great.
yeah, it just happens, and
Right.
I used to be the handsome guy. Now I'm the silver fox.
Yes, you are. I love that.
But that's how I think people they can start to learn that about ceremony in their own lives, because all European cultures had roots in nature. They had roots in culture before Christianity came in and kind of turned them into a Christian world. But they
Hmm.
all had Druid work. Yeah, yeah. They all had connections to their world. There's a show that comes on here. It's called Vikings.
Hmm.
Yeah, some of that gets into some of the teachings of the spiritual ways of the native people, and then you got Catholicism alongside of it, and the priest doesn't really like what this healer's doing, but the healer saves the baby, but he didn't agree with the way it happens.
Mm.
He wanted to pray, but
Mm. Right.
she actually took herbal medicines and made something heal the baby. You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
yeah. So, but those are witchcraft.
Yeah, right. Casey, this has been so interesting. Uh, I know that folks listening will want to find you and learn more about you. What are some ways people can find your books and your website?
Yeah, the books they're all on Amazon. You just got to Google books by Casey Church, and they'll all pop up, and several other books will pop up in there along. One book that it, I was part of, it's the First Nations version.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah,
First Nations version.
there it
Hey,
is.
there, the
Yeah,
First Nations version Bible. I should probably take it off blur. There we go.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a very, very, very good book to read. It's the First Nations, and it's called an Indigenous translation of the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
The technical term for creating it is a thought for thought dynamic equivalent,
Mm.
but it's in a vernacular that speaks to the native heart in it, because everybody has a native heart. Like I
Yeah.
just said,
Mm.
they're all got roots in some, pagan culture before you became Christian.
Hmm.
There's some connection there. So this speaks in a really powerful way, and we use it in our ministry here. quite a
Mm.
bit. So there's that. Another one that I would suggest if you want to learn a little bit more, but it's pretty heavy. This is the book study that I'm doing with the group right now,
Mm.
reading the Bible on Turtle Island. It's an indigenous hermeneutic.
Mm.
So it's how to see the Bible through Native American eyes.
Yeah.
So I guess the other way is look under Good Medicine Way, and you'll find if you look under YouTube and you want a Good Medicine Way, we have over 200 programs out there of different Native American speakers talking about spirituality, contextualization, ceremony, church, uh, all these different expressions on our program, and you can scroll through and see them. Some of them have over 150 different views because they're pretty popular.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. And this one here will be popular now too on your on
That's
your
right.
program.
It
Yeah.
will.
It's going to get massive hits and people are going to say, you got to listen to this heretic, you know.
That's right. This crazy
Yeah.
guy, sweat lodges, smoke. Well, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're super fascinating, and I'm sure the folks listening are thinking you're fascinating too. And I would say fascinating because, this isn't something that every man walking down the street is thinking about or talking about. And so, thank you for sharing your heart, and bless you in the work that you're doing. And thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. And I hope to see you someday soon there when I travel through Tennessee.
Yes, you're welcome. You can come. We get the guest room ready.
Okay.
What Casey has talked to us today about is so important. Thank you for your wisdom. Special note, I'd hoped to have a man named Damon Neeson on. He'd had some things come up. He wasn't able to be interviewed today, but I hope to feature him later. So just so you know, those of you who wanted to hear him, he's going to continue to pick up the conversation about ceremony, but in particular with song, if we can get him. So stay tuned. So Casey, thank you for reminding us that through ceremony, we're not alone. We're part of a living, breathing landscape. And I just love this conversation. But the next one I've got coming is really interesting because the question is, what happens when we hear the landscape talking back? I've called in a new acquaintance. Her name is Francisca Santabanez, and she is going to join us to discuss plant spirit talk and the art of listening to the intelligence of the earth. Yes, plants can speak back. So come back next week. Looking forward to seeing you. If this conversation has been helpful, go check us out on Substack. Drop us a couple bucks a month. You can get in on a monthly conversation, or leave us a review. That's the way to help us out as well so other people can find this podcast. Thanks for being here. See you next week.
Said I will fly with you. Won't you fly with me over the hills and plains?